Hey everybody, welcome back to Starflag Media Gaming. The gaming world loves to paint Sony as the cool kid on the block, the tastemaker, the innovator, the crowned king of consoles. But if you trace the footsteps behind the curtain, the picture starts to look different, much different. Because Sony didn't climb the mountain through divine inspiration. They climbed it the same way a shadow climbs a wall, by following the shape cast by trailblazers, by someone else. Today we're breaking down how PlayStation copied its way to becoming the number one brand for a very long time. And trust me, once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Before the legend of the PlayStation was alive, Sony was the quiet sidekick in Nintendo's lab, believe it or not. They weren't rivals, they were actually partners. Sony built the sound chip for the Super Nintendo. Sony published games on the Super Nintendo. Sony attended meetings, studied Nintendo's philosophy, absorbed every drop of console wisdom like a student sitting in the back of the dojo. This wasn't just a collaboration. This was a reconnaissance disguised as teamwork. And in the 90s, Nintendo asked Sony to help build a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. A small moment in history that gave Sony the final missing page in their playbook. When that partnership collapsed, Sony walked away with all the insights needed to build their own console. Sony unveils the original PlayStation, and fans lose their mind. The industry calls it fresh and futuristic. But let's be honest, once I looked at this thing, you could tell exactly who raised it. The PlayStation's light gray box, that wasn't an accident. It looked like a sleek, modern interpretation of the NES aesthetic. Sony didn't reinvent the console look, they remixed Nintendo's DNA. And that controller? Please. It was a refined Super Nintendo controller, which of course goes to show that it was originally going to be a Super Nintendo add-on. Same general shape, same general button layout, and all Sony did was bolt on 2 extra shoulder buttons on top of it and called it brand new. Cute mod? Sure. But innovation? Let's chill. Sony didn't leap forward, they traced. 1996 rolls around and Nintendo drops the Nintendo 64. Now, this is a year after Sony dropped their PlayStation. And the world meets the analog stick. And yes, the analog stick did exist on other consoles previous to this. But it wasn't until Nintendo put it on their system that it became a standard. A revolution in control. A paradigm shift so big, even Sega took notes. And Sony? Well, they wasted zero time. The original PS1 controller suddenly grew 2 analog sticks and turned into the dual analog. And later the DualShock. 2 sticks, big vibration motors, copy, paste, profit. Let's count the sequence. N64 introduces analog sticks. Sony, me too, adds 2 analog sticks. Super Nintendo has shoulder buttons. Me too, 2 extra shoulder buttons. Nintendo releases the Rumble Pack. Me 3, DualShock rolls in with built-in rumble. 2 rumble motors. Nintendo experiments with cameras on the Game Boy. Well, Sony, me 4, enter the iToy. Sega's Dreamcast introduces Hall effect analog triggers. Sony, that's a nice idea. DualShock 2 and 3 follow with analog triggers. Nintendo releases the wireless Wavebird. Sony, wireless you say? Eventually, their controllers cut the cord. Nintendo unveils motion controls with the Wii. And here comes Sony sprinting down the hallway. Sony introduces the 6-axis on the PS3 and then claims that rumble had to be removed because it interfered with motion controls. Meanwhile, the Wii was over there in the corner shaking like a maraca with full rumble support. Sony wasn't innovating, They were improvising excuses. Later, Sony releases the DualShock 3, quietly putting Rumble back in. Then they double down with the PlayStation Move, a glowing, awkward Wii Remote tribute band. This wasn't interpretation. This was imitation with a fresh coat of Sony paint. Hell, it wasn't just Nintendo that they copied. The original Xbox rolled in with a full hard drive baked into the console, true online infrastructure, and a direction that felt like early days of PC gaming was crossing over into the living room. Sony sees that blueprint, and surprise, the PlayStation 3 launches with its own hard drive system, its own online network, and enough inspired ideas from Xbox Live to make lawyers nervous. But this time, something goes wrong. Sony actually almost finished in third place. The imitation formula for the PS3, well, that was failing. The PS3's launch was a stumble, a rare moment where Sony didn't know who to copy next. And what about Nintendo's worst selling system of all time, the Wii U? Well, the Wii U shows the world a console with a dedicated controller screen, a hybrid device preview years ahead of its time. Sony's reaction? Oh, well, let's add remote play between the PlayStation 4 and the Vita, a concept that felt like a mirror reflection of the Wii U concept. You fast forward to today, and Sony announces the PlayStation Portal, a literal handheld screen that streams from the PS5. A spiritual twin to Nintendo's idea from 2012, a decade and some years ago. And yet, another chapter in the pattern. Sony didn't stop with hardware though. When Nintendo debuts Super Smash Bros., it takes a couple console generations, but Nintendo's all-star crossover brawler with personality dripping from every punch. What does Sony do? They reply with PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, the most please notice me clone in gaming history. A solid attempt, but the soul wasn't there. A counterfeit painting that couldn't match the original brushstrokes. Sony's strategy has always been simple. Watch the competition, study what works, add a little refinement, then claim that it's yours. See, they love to watch the others blaze the trail and then pave over it with a shinier road and label it Sony. And the wild part? It worked. The PS1 and the PS2 were the kings of their generation. The PS4. Copying turned PlayStation into the biggest name in gaming for 3 out of their 5-year consoles. 3 out of their 5 consoles. Not because they invented everything first, but because they knew how to follow the best polish that the rest had already made and then sell it like it was their destiny. Sony didn't climb the mountain alone. They climbed using the carved out steps left by Nintendo, Sega, and Microsoft. And that, my friends, is how PlayStation copied its way to number 1 in 3 out of their 5 console generations. Leave a like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. If not, leave a dislike and let me know in the comments below why. As always, I want to thank you guys for joining me, and we will catch you in the next video.